Why do we talk about action and learning? Well, everybody talks about action. The people watching this video will typically be activists, practitioners who are extremely busy trying to achieve change and make a difference. International frameworks are all about action, priorities for action. We're very used to talking about action, and we can tend to think of learning as being something we either did once before at school and other educational institutions, or something that academics do in a different world which doesn't seem to have much relevance to our own. And yet, for many years, people working in the field of international development have seen that learning is actually pretty critical to progress, and without it, a huge amount of action can result in very little change. One of the earliest very well-known thinkers on this was Paulo Freire in Brazil, who, having been educated himself and then thrown into relative poverty, started to look around him and see why things never seemed to change. And what he saw was that the people he was rubbing shoulders with had got used to the fact that life would always be like that. They couldn't see any possibility for change, and they assumed that what they were told by authorities and institutions was fact. There was nothing that could be any different. And to cut a long story short, he developed a process for encouraging people to start criticising, to think critically about their own experience. So he said, rather than just carrying on acting, look at what's going on around you, sit down and talk about it together, and start to think about changes, even small changes that you could make. This basic process has formed the heart of many participative programs of work since, and the word participation itself has become quite a buzzword in international development, sometimes seen positively and sometimes seen negatively. But it's very important when treated properly, because the key to change is enabling people to start identifying what changes are possible. This is why we talk about action and learning, and we present it as, in simplified terms, as a cycle. It starts, well, a cycle can start at any point. Let's start with reflection. Reflection is the process of simply looking at what you've done and saying, what have we learnt from that? Could we have done things differently? Was there something more significant that we could have done? And often, as conversations of this sort continue, things that had never been thought about emerge. So it's quite important that this is done not just individually in our own heads, but through groups meeting together. And that reflection can sometimes unearth a possibility which may improve the situation. In one example we've mentioned before, people in an Ethiopian village who had many needs in terms of health, education, agriculture and so on, realised that all of these were glued together by the need for a road for access to the area. And so they focused on the challenge of building that road, recognising that no one else was going to do it for them, so they'd have to do it themselves. So a process of reflection led to action. That action achieves sometimes a very small change, but in doing so it changes the situation. In that particular case, starting to construct the road attracted the interest of the local government, which led to further progress as the local government started to provide better support to the village. And also that action leads on to a further reflection. So what have we done here? And what do we learn from it? One of the most important things people learn is that they are capable of taking action and working together. And that in itself becomes a galvanising force. In another example we've mentioned in Cambodia, people pursuing action to develop a local fund for microinsurance realised they had the capability between them to start accumulating resources and using them to improve their lives. And so that programme has actually grown and developed beyond the time when there was any external assistance for it. So action and learning continues in a cycle, and we represent it as a spiral because as it continues it tends to expand. So very small steps lead to people realising their potential to work together, and that leads to them embarking on more ambitious steps. As they do so, they attract other people, other potential partners, whether it's other communities, other civil society organisations, local government, private enterprise, and so the scale of what they're doing grows. And as that happens, people, as in the case of the Cambodian village for example, become less vulnerable, more resilient, more able to deal with external impacts without them affecting their progress. And that's why we represent this spiral as moving from a position of vulnerability to a position of relative strength. And all of that has at the heart of it this process of learning, not the kind of learning that's done in schools or the kind of learning that's done in academic institutions, but learning which is based on experience. It's called technically experiential learning for that reason. And that can transform the effort which is put in through action by targeting that action, by engaging and galvanising people to share in that action and achieving real change. You can find out more about this at the web address which is at the bottom of the screen now.